Over to you, Helen.
Right, can you hear me? Yep, brilliant. Hello everyone, and welcome. It's lovely to be here with you. My name's Helen Foster, and I run the East Midlands Oral History Archive, which is based at the University of Leicester. It's been fascinating finding out the history of the Promenade and the surrounding area, and you're going to be hopefully using oral history as a way to really enhance the history of the area. So what I'm going to do tonight then is to just give you a little overview of what oral history is, and how it works, and what's so wonderful about it, and why it's a really good way of capturing the history of places. I haven't got PowerPoint to show you, I'm just going to talk, but what I'd like to try and do is to play you an example of oral history, a couple of examples. So bear with me while I set this up, making sure that I share computer sound. So I'm just going to play you a clip first of all. Okay, so unshare screen. Did you all hear that? No? Okay, I'm going to try again. Bear with me.
As Florence Nightingale has London, to guard the progress, 1890. I hope my voice may perpetuate the great work of my life.
Did you hear that? Yep, brilliant. What that is a clip of a very early sound recording of voice. I don't know if anybody managed to pick out who that might have been. It was Florence Nightingale, and it's just really an example of showing you where oral history, not really where it started, but where the recording side came in. So just going to unshare my screen. Whoops. Okay, so oral history then is really the recording of people's memories or their sort of spoken testimonies of events in the past. And this is usually done through an interview. Okay, so stories, oral history is actually the beginnings of it predate, they go back in history a long way, because stories were handed down verbally, orally, before we began to write. If you think of tales round the fire, passing around tales, and often handed down through families intergenerationally, so from grandparents to grandchildren and on down through the generations, which is why it's really fascinating looking at the census returns that Chris had to see the families that have lived in places and wondering what stories might have been passed down through those families. Oral history as a sort of practice, if you like, really came into its own from about the 19th century, when we started to be able to record sound. So that's like the clip there that you heard was one of these very early recordings. But as we moved into the 20th century, this became much more accessible, if you like. So from Edison's recordings, and that was Edison that had recorded that clip of Florence Nightingale, we got the wax cylinder, and then we moved into the disc, the record, if you like. And then that marvellous invention, the magnetic tape. So we had reel-to-reel tape recorders, which really were a great boon for oral history, if you like. So people were able to go out and do recordings. And this became even better with the cassette recorder, the cassette tape. So oral history became quite portable. People were able to go out with their little machines and record people. Into the late 20th century, we had something called a mini disc, which was around for a very brief period, but then it all went digital. We had CDs, and then nowadays, everything that we record for oral history, we record it digitally. And that's why it's such a great, accessible way of recording community heritage, because it's very accessible. So it became established then as a sort of practice, if you like, in universities, really, in the early 20th century. And it sort of developed alongside history, the practice of history in universities. But it had its critics. It was seen, and still is by some people, as a very unreliable source. But this is because it's quite different to historical sources like the ones that we've been looking at today, the census returns, the other documents that we have, because it's very, very subjective. And I'm going to come back to that in a bit and tell you a little bit more about the nature of oral history. So as well as developing then in universities, it began to become popular with community groups, very much because people could buy a cassette recorder, get tapes and go out and record. And it became really what we call a bottom-up history. People began to go out and record stories locally, and hidden histories really started coming out. The things that weren't being recorded in history books, things at a local level, stories from and within minority and unheard groups in society, those that previously weren't really given a voice. So we started getting histories of women, of Black people, of ethnic minorities, LGBTQ histories, histories from disabled people, older people, the list goes on. We started getting all these stories being collected because people were able to do that. And what we have now today with oral history is a really vibrant, interdisciplinary process, if you like, or practice. So it is a process. There is the collecting of the oral history itself. And then we have the product that comes out, these resulting recordings that come out at the end of it. It requires a certain amount of skill because you need to be really knowing what you want to have an idea about interviewing techniques in order to really get the best out of an interview. But it's not anything that we don't actually probably already do. It's just a formalizing of it, if you like. It can also actually be very therapeutic, giving people an opportunity to talk and share their stories is a real it's a real privilege to be able to do that. And so there is that element of it being therapeutic, particularly if these are stories that people haven't really shared before. And particularly during lockdown, and I'm going to talk about that as well in a minute, it's been a way of moving things online and really engaging with people who have been quite isolated, being able for them to share their stories online or over the phone or whatever. Oral history as well can be incredibly creative. The stuff that comes out of the end, the interviews that come out at the end of it, you may want to interpret these in various ways. So you may want them to appear in books, you may want some kind of exhibition with them in, you may want clips in a film or some kind of TV production. You may want to use them to inspire artworks. the list goes on really of what you can do with the wonderful stories, anecdotes, words that come out of oral histories. So again, to reiterate, it's very accessible. It doesn't require broadcast quality equipment. You can really, at a very basic level, record people on your mobile phone. You can get a reasonable quality doing that. I would always recommend for a project such as this project that you do use proper recording equipment. But even so, that's not out of reach of projects today to do that. To go back to the subjectivity as well, what you're getting from oral history is a different kind of historical truth. You're getting a whole range of different perspectives, of different viewpoints, sort of really to tap into what Chris was saying about how different people perceived the changes in their housing. Some people had really positive reactions to it. Some people found it a very negative experience. So everybody has a different experience and a different point of view about the same thing. And that's something that oral history can capture as well when you're talking to people. It can be entertaining. You can get some great stories out of that. It can be informative as well. You can actually find information out that you perhaps haven't found in other documents. And it can be very emotive as well. You can really touch on people's emotions. So there are times where you really do need to tread quite carefully when you're interviewing people. So yes, the different viewpoints you get then can really, if you're adding oral history into a whole range of other documents, if it's a complementary source to photographs, documents, you're getting this rich tapestry of history. So it is really, really, really good to have that involved in putting together a history project. And also it's worth mentioning that it's not just the stories of older people that oral history is out there to capture. Obviously, people who have been living for longer will have much more wealth of experience to talk about, but it's worth thinking about interviewing younger people, children maybe, about their perceptions of things now. Although that's not strictly history, it will be history in time. And it's really interesting to set contemporary experiences against people's experiences of things in the past as well. So if you're going to sign up to be an oral history interviewer or an interviewee, if you want to take part in oral history, a little list of things you might need. An oral history interview itself requires very little. You want an interviewer and you want an interviewee. You want a venue for carrying out the interview. And this has changed over time. Quite often it used to be people going into each other's homes, the interviewer calling in to see the interviewee and doing the recording there. This has changed sometimes. If it's nowadays, if it's people you don't know, interviews tend to take place in sort of mutually arranged places such as rooms in libraries or community centres, that kind of thing. However, in a project around place, where quite often you might have people interviewing their neighbours or people they know, there's no reason why interviewing in people's homes can't continue. And that can provide a very comfortable, safe environment for the interviewee to feel comfortable in, to talk about their stories as well. There are lots of other things about the venue that you need to bear in mind. I won't go into too much detail now, but obviously you need to make sure that any barking dogs are out of the way, and you know, close windows, inform your partner what's going on so they don't sort of come in and start adding stuff to the interview, all those sorts of things. Recording equipment as well. I've touched on the idea that you can keep it really basic if you want with a mobile phone, but actually you can use a really straightforward, simple recording device. You can get little task cams and Zoom recorders that you can use. Sorry, I should have had one as an example to show you, but I don't have one here at the moment, obviously because I'm at home. But they're really straightforward and simple to use. I mean, that's the great thing now, that this equipment never be scared by the technology. That's the thing to say, whether you are an interviewer or an interviewee. If you're interviewing, play around with the recorder for a day or so before you go out and do your interview, so that you know how it works. Record using batteries as well, in case you have a power cut. There are lots of little tips like that is worth knowing about as well. The other thing that's really worth a mention is in your what you need list, if you're going to do some oral history, is to make sure that you've got all your permissions in place. So there's all sorts of things around permissions and the ethics of capturing people's memories in interview situations. And actually, again, this is something not to be scared of. There are straightforward procedures to follow. And it's just making sure that there's transparency, that the interviewee knows what they're contributing to, that the interviewer knows what they're going to be doing with the interview. And it's all really, really straightforward. The East Midlands Oral History Archive gives lots of advice on all that kind of stuff as well. So do remember that there are places that you can go to get that kind of information. So before the interview as well, it's worth being as prepared as you can. The kind of interview that most oral history interviews, the structure they take, we'd call it a semi-structured interview. So this is not following a rigid list of questions as if you're answering a questionnaire, but neither is it going in and just having an unprepared conversation with someone. The best idea is to have some overarching themes, an idea of topics, a series of prompts, but leaving room for spontaneous things to come up. Because actually, you don't know what's going to come up in an interview, and you want to be open to that in case something comes up you hadn't thought about, and then you've got room to go and find out more about that as well. Make sure your interviewee is really well briefed about what you're going to do. And usually, if you can do your interviews face-to-face, which fingers crossed you'll be able to do that, I really hope you will, have a cup of tea with them first and chat things over. It's usually a good plan. During the interview as well, it's always worth remembering, quite often, if you're an interviewer, you're going to be interviewing about a project that you might be really, really interested in. You might be absolutely passionate about it. And it can be really challenging not to get involved in the interview. It can be really challenging for the interview to remain an interview and not become a conversation. For you not to want to share your stories because you're bouncing off each other in that situation. So it's quite a challenge. So remembering that it's not a conversation, that we want to hear their story, not your story. And also think, well, if I've got loads of stories, maybe it's worth me being interviewed as well, is always a way to think about that. Another thing is to always let the silences be. An oral history interview doesn't have to be a constant stream of chat, because if you think about it, when we're trying to engage with our memories and remember things, we quite often pause and think. We quite often stop and think, do I actually want to tell somebody about that, or am I going to hold that piece of information back? You might actually be thinking, I've not spoken about this for 10, 20 years, and I'm not sure if I want to share it. You might be thinking, have I got the right words to actually get this memory out? So there can be lots of reasons for a silence in an oral history interview, and it's always worth letting that silence happen for a bit. And don't worry about there being silences on the recording. And always remember that you can press pause as well. You're not looking to do something that's going to be broadcast live on the BBC. You're just looking to capture somebody's memories. And check in with your interviewee as well. If they perhaps go silent for a long time, there may be a reason for that. So check in with them, see that they're okay. Do they want to take a break? Do they want to have a pause? And then after the interview as well, make sure you save the interview. Never edit the master file, and make sure that you always leave contact details with the interviewee, because when somebody's shared their story, particularly if it's been quite an emotional journey for them, they may in hours, in an hour's time, or they may wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat thinking, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or what on earth's going to happen to my recording. And if they've got a point of contact and somebody to contact, then that's always a good thing to follow things up. I'm just going to give you a little, just touch on, because it's been such a part of life for the past year, I'm just going to touch on how the pandemic has affected oral history work, just in case you do end up continuing to do things online. When the pandemic happened, we went into lockdown last March, I think every oral history project in the country stopped. Certainly the one I was working on did. And it was really, really challenging to know what to do, because something about being in the same room as someone and interviewing them, that dynamic is really, really special. And to try and recreate that online, it just didn't seem quite right. But after a few weeks or a month or so, it became evident that actually there are several things at play here. First of all, we want to keep up the momentum of the projects that we're working on. Secondly, it might actually be a way of capturing not just what we're wanting to listen to, the stories we're wanting to capture, but also tuning into what's going on at the moment and how that is affecting people in this time. And also has been a way of continuing to engage with people who may have become quite isolated during the pandemic. So the project I was working on, and others I know of, went online. Now this proved problematic for people who didn't use or don't use the internet, but for those who continue to engage and use the internet, it was quite a positive. I mean, some of the negatives of this were that some of the sound quality was compromised because we were people were interviewing over Zoom. But the upside of that was Zoom actually meant that we could interview people without having to travel a distance. We could include people from further afield in the interviewing. So we could open up our radius of interviewees. The other thing that came out of it as well, working during the lockdown, was adapting the format of what we were actually doing. So, as I said right at the beginning, the definition of oral history is two people, an interviewer and an interviewee, and they're recording the stories or the memories of events in the past. And what we actually did was we slightly changed the idea of oral history to spoken testimonies. And so what we did was we recorded some facilitated conversations, bringing groups of people together, which worked very well on Zoom. And we also asked people individually to record audio diaries as well about certain things that we prompted them on. So we ended up bringing in different types of spoken testimony into the project. And it's proved quite interesting. So I think the point I'm trying to make really is, if for any reason things can't go ahead or in face-to-face situations, there are ways that you can be really flexible and still gather oral history around and spoken testimonies around your project. Right, I'm just conscious of time, so I will wind up. The other thing to mention as well, just at the end, is if you are going to be volunteering and working on oral history, you may well want to, I think it would be advisable once you've done your recordings, to put in place some kind of navigational tool. And what I mean by this is either a full transcript, which is an awful lot of work and very, very time consuming, or what you may prefer to do is like a time-coded summary. So you're literally writing a sort of index or a summary of the interview to capture what people have been talking about with time codes. And that way you've got a way of going back and engaging with that interview without having to just sit and listen to it all the way through. I'll pop in the chat as well to organisations, the Oral History Society, and who are the go-to place for anything to do with oral history. And British Library Stands have got some really good examples of online oral history as well. And I'll also pop in details of the East Midlands Oral History Archive. I should have said as well that we offer training to oral history projects around the region. We also take in recordings at the University of Leicester and look after them as well. So if anybody has any queries about oral history, please do get in touch with me and I'll pop the details in the chat. And I think that's time for me to stop talking and hand back to Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Helen. I hope everybody found that useful.
Helen,
oh, you're right, Chris.
I'm saying thanks, Helen. Sorry.
Oh, oh yeah. I hope everyone found that useful. Yeah, oral histories are incredibly important, and they're a big backbone of this project, really. So if you are interested in getting involved in helping us collect some of those, Helen will be running some more formal training to really kind of practice our skills at effectively collecting oral histories. And as Helen mentioned, we've actually got a little bit of budget to transcribe some of the oral histories that we collect. So they'll form part of the project and go on the website at the end. We won't be able to do all of them, I'm sure, but yes, we will be able to transcribe some of them. So that's great. It is very time consuming, and I dodged that bullet at the beginning of the project when we were putting around who was going to do it. So great. So anyway, I'll shut up. There's been a few questions in the chat that I think Chris has kind of dealt with a few of those. Is that right, Chris? Are there any that's outstanding that you've seen? Are you still there? Oh, it's frozen. Wow, is everyone still? Yeah, Chris?
Yeah.
No.
Oh. Yeah, I can hear me, Laura.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. You just froze for a minute there, panicked.
I think there was a bit of interference. What was? Did you ask me a question?
It was just, I was kind of keeping an eye on the chat, but I just wanted to see if there was anything that I missed, because I know you've been answering them. There was some queries around the census, was that right?
Yeah, so one person asked for census. I've downloaded them all and I've put them on a Dropbox, and there's a link down there. So if you want to dig in, please do. And if there are any images within the report or from the talk tonight that you would like to have for personal purposes, just contact us and I'll get them to you. The only thing you can't do is use them for commercial purposes. So if you want to use them for selling hot dogs at the Forest Match, you can't do that, but you can use them for, putting up in your house or your own studies, because that's just copyright law. But yeah, census links, yeah, have a good dig around. Yeah. Was there any other questions?
Tracy's just asked a question. Does anybody know when the 2 corner shops on Campbell Grove opened and closed? Don't know if anyone wants to address that in the chat. I remember the one at the bottom of Campbell Grove is the right as you're looking up, and I think the shop owner was Harry. I couldn't even begin to think when it closed. It was probably a good 25 years ago. So I have no concept of time, so I'm not even going to attempt to.
The Shipstone sign is almost still there, isn't it? I think.
Is it still there as sort of a ghost sign?
Just about. Yeah, would be nice to get that painted again, perhaps.
There you go. Next HLF project.
Yeah, that's true.
I know Paul on Robin Hood Street has been there for a while, and he had the shop across the road, which he turned into houses, and I remember that was VG's. We used to get our fireworks there. I won't admit that anywhere else. So yeah, sorry Tracy, I don't know the answer to that, but please do post it on the Facebook page, or we can try and post it and try and find out for you. Helen, you're talking about the Ruth I. Johns book. that right?
That was me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, Laura,
sorry.
that was me. I don't know if you've come across that book at all.
I've got a copy.
I've got a copy here. It's a fabulous book. I just thought I'd mention it because it's a brilliant piece of work.
Yes, I hold on to that dearly because I think they're in short supply,
Yes.
those books, but it's really good, and I've got some really good images in there. But I think you can probably get a copy from the local library and order one if anyone's interested in that. It's really, really interesting. And Ruth was involved in, it was a local charity, I think, that did sort of reclaimed furniture for sort of lower income families and things. She was kind of interested. I think it was called Family First or something.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, really, really influential. So there's another message down here. Let's have a look. Tracy, basement of 1 Campbell Grove is tiled. Wrong key. That's the story of my life. Sorry, is that a conversation that's happening there? Sorry if I'm missing this. It's a bit hard to view in the chat function. If anyone wants to come on and say anything, pop your hand up because I can make you a panelist, by the way, so you can chat. So I think it used to be a dairy or a butcher's shop. Chris, are you spotted that? Basement of number 1 Campbell Grove is tiled. Does that ring any bells?
It used to be a butcher's shop.
That's what Tracy's put in the chat. Yeah,
I
she thinks it used to be
I will
a
make
dairy or
it.
a butcher's shop.
I didn't know that one. No, it's good to know. I'm still busy. I've noticed someone wants the census links again, so I'm busy trying to dig that out. Yeah, no, it's like a crazy computer game, isn't it? You've got to try and respond to everyone, like was it Space Invaders or something?
We have got a question.
Rick Hall wants the
links.
Again.
Be interesting to hear if there's a change in population in terms of whether folks are moving in from elsewhere, which is my impression, including myself. Yeah, I think I'd be interested if there's a change in population in terms of whether folks are moving in from elsewhere.
We did look at a bit of that. Looked at a sample of 17 houses using the census records. I mean, if you want to look at 95 houses and folks moving in from all over, it's going to take a long time. So I had to keep the sample short. But it seemed like in the 19th century up until the 1910s, you can see that people are migrating generally from the East Midlands area, so Leicestershire, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Nottingham, to this location. I've not looked at where people were migrating to after. That would be a good question to have. I did see that some came from as far afield as Germany or the southwest of England. I think because there were associations with the lace trade. But again, I've only looked at a sample of about 17 or 20 because it's such a big history. So if you want to dig around those census records, I've tried it again, put it on the panel. If you can't see it on that panel, just send me an email. I'll get them to you because they are nice to flick through and they do raise questions, but they're so enormous that you can't read them all, I don't think.
Yeah, the census, as you say, Chris, has been invaluable, and I know we've all just filled one in. Hopefully, we've all just filled one in.
Oh,
and, and hopefully that's kind of highlighted, why it's important to fill these things in. I know they feel intrusive, but actually, in years to come, it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, we're going to confuse future historians with what we've put in them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
pulling their hair out.
Yes, I think someone exchanged a story with us. I believe it was on Facebook or in passing when we were due to start the project last year about the changing demographic of the area, and I heard a rumour that one of the first mosques were in the area. So I don't know if it was in someone's house, but it was kind of one of the first early mosques in Nottingham. So I'd really like to explore if anyone knows anything about that or anyone that might know. We'll post something on Facebook as well.
Yeah, there does seem to be quite an interesting picture emerging, doesn't there, of quite interesting initiatives. someone left a comment which I've took a copy of regarding a community of people who worked at the Playhouse, for example. That's quite interesting, because the Playhouse was very pioneering in what it did in the post-war period. And I think there's also some bizarre story about the coffin lady, and I don't know what that means, but I'm interested, so hopefully we might find out.
Yeah, if anyone knows anything about that, I know the person personally who posted that post. I know the person personally who posted that post, and I will grab her, because she talks about this lady, and she says she drove around in a coffin, and I don't know if she meant hearse or coffin. So that's something we need to explore, but it's a German lady from what I understand.
Oh, right,
so,
okay.
So yeah, these stories are brilliant, and they're all starting to emerge. So please do share this with people, because the more stories we get, the better. There's another question in the Q&A from Peter. Do you need to live in the Promenade area to get involved? Absolutely not. The more the merrier. Chris and I don't live there, and Helen doesn't live there. So, yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, there's a few opportunities to get involved, and I think I've posted the email address a couple of times in the chat. Yeah, we're looking for people to help us collect oral histories, and also help us with some of that research if that intrigues you. And Chris can definitely give you some tips on researching the archives, because you'll just be there forever, because they're fabulous, the archives, if you've not visited them before. So Peter, I think it was Peter, wasn't it? Peter was, so yeah, please do get in touch.
Because I mean, a lot of people will have moved in and out of the area, and they've got very interesting stories. So yeah, we need to bring in all those people who used to live there, and find out what had happened. So yeah, more than welcome. We did have an interesting person who I think some of you knew better than me, who had an interesting story at the start of the evening, didn't he? What was his name, Laura? Was it Eric?
Was it Glyn?
Glyn, yeah.
Yes, I don't know if he's still here, but
no, I mean he had absolute gold dust of information.
yes, we're hoping Glyn's going to get in touch. He was the sheriff, wasn't he?
Yeah, so he was saying that he moved out to work in the Navy. Saw some refurbishment in the 50s, which I've read about a little bit. And then when he came back, I think it was the 80s, the whole community had completely changed. So very interesting story, I think, to tell.
Yeah, the pubs had gone and the community had left, which is that story of clearance, isn't it, really? That, it's for the greater good, but actually it was whole swathes of communities that were just moved out, and many didn't return. There's a great Facebook site, if people don't know it, St Anne's, I think it's called St Anne's Pre-Demolition. It's Facebook, and they've got a website, and they meet, or they did pre-pandemic, they met yearly at Stonebridge City Farm to get together. And again, it's these people that were moved out during those clearances, who have stayed in touch, and there's people from all over the world, who remember living in St Anne's fondly, and are quite sort of down on some of the documentaries that were done at the time about how such an awful place it was to live, and they just said that wasn't the case at all. For them, that wasn't the case. It was all they knew, and they loved it. So yeah, some interesting social history stories there, I think.
Laura,
sorry, Helen, go on.
I just saw a message pop up from Alison wanting to know how to get involved in the oral history side of things. I don't know if you've got an...
I think have I just answered that? Yes, sorry. I think I'm sorry if I'm answering them privately and you can't see, but yes. So Peter asked, and I've popped the email address there, and Alison has asked, and again I've popped the email. So please do drop us an email, and my number's on the website as well if you prefer to have a chit chat. I'm always up for a chit chat, as you can tell. So is there anything else? I'm conscious that we've got 4 minutes left.
Did someone called Margaret want to show some photos?
She did, but I can't see her hand up, and that's the only way I can kind of... Margaret, if you're still there.
Just tea time. Or just
it's getting late, isn't it? I had my dinner just before. Luckily, I'd be on my knees by now, making less sense than I already do. Yeah, Margaret, if you're still there, I think if you could pop your hand up, I can make you a panelist, which means you can show your pictures or share your screen. But if not, again, please use that email address or give me a call, and we can get you down to document your story. I'm not sure if I can quickly share my screen with you.
Yeah, Margaret can't do it at the moment, so
okay.
Facebook
share this. This is a, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a picture of a gentleman that was shared on our Facebook. I'll just get the information from you. This is Charles Bradley. He was a private in the 2nd Battalion Sherwood Foresters and died of wounds at Manchester Hospital. He was the second son of Ben and Elizabeth Bradley of 6 Campbell Grove. He was aged 24 when he died, and they thought he was one of the first casualties of the First World War. So again, someone shared that with us on Facebook. And yeah, it was just a really poignant reminder of the people that have lived on that street, really. I don't know how to stop sharing now. No. Anyway, okay. So, oh yeah, sorry, just saw Margaret. So that's kind of it from our end, unless Chris has got anything to add, or anyone else?
Oh.
Yeah, you stop share.
Stop share. Yeah, just want to say thank you for everyone who's attended and listened to the talks. Thank you for Laura for really keeping everything shipshape. I'm so glad that she's done this. Otherwise, I think my hair would have fallen out, and it would have been wouldn't have been pleasant at all. So thank you for Laura for that, and Helen as well for telling us all about how oral history works, the nuts and bolts of it, because it's really quite key, I think, to just getting more of those stories as the weeks progress. If you had to cut out because of you had to make your tea, or you weren't able to watch all of it, we've got all this information on the website, so you can download the report, as we've said, and have a good old flick through. And if you need any census records, any photographs, please get in touch, because I think if we give something, we might get things in return. I think that's what it's about. So that's it from me, Laura, I think.
Fab, absolutely. And if you can't join the project, because we're all busy people, and if you can't get involved from now until September, like I say, we will have the celebration event in September. Hopefully it will be in person, and if you feel comfortable enough by that point to come along, then please do, because I will be there, and Chris will be there, and maybe Helen will be there, maybe Linda, just to say thank you and whatever. So yeah, that's it. And thank you for Linda for coming along. I know you're probably incredibly busy at the moment with various things that's going on.
Yes, thank you, Linda.
It's been one of my nicer events this week, so thank you very much for that. I really enjoyed it. Fascinating, brilliant book, brilliant research.
Great, thank you. Right, thank you to all the panelists and all the attendees, and look forward to hearing from you. Thanks ever so much, everyone. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.